Hello, everybody, and welcome to Digital Works TV. I'm Steve Johnson, and with me, Homer Hickam. And Homer, I don't believe anybody is going to need to be introduced to you, but in fact, I don't even know where to start with this interview. For one thing, you have a Wikipedia page, which impresses the heck out of me because I don't have one, but you're one of the few people, heck, you might be the only person I know whose life, or at least a portion of their life, has been in a well-attended, applauded movie.
Well, thank you, Steve. That's true. That movie was called October Sky, and as you know, it's a fairly old movie. It came out in 1999.
I don't like to hear that fairly old with something associated
Fairly,
with 1999.
fairly. But it's an interesting movie in that it was made by Universal Studios. They were not sure that they really wanted to make it almost to the very end. Joe Johnston was the director, a really well-known director, did Jumanji and Jurassic Park 3 and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and that kind of thing. And he's the one that, he and a fellow by the name of Chuck Gordon, who did Field of Dreams, produced Field of Dreams, are the ones that really kind of maneuvered it through the Universal Studios labyrinth, and it is rather a large labyrinth. And so they made the movie. Universal dropped it in February, which is like where you try to kill movies.
And the Oscar ones came out at Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you come out in February, it's kind of like, we don't really have faith in your movie. So it had a nice run. It made its money back, which was around $28 million through the theatrical run, and then it went into VHS. That's when it took off at that point.
That used to be how movies that might not have made it at the box office made it.
Yeah, then Blockbuster, and then every substitute teacher in the world started showing October Sky.
Okay.
And it just blossomed at that point, and it's still a very popular movie. It's out on Netflix and several other places.
Well, no, it's Jake Gyllenhaal plays you as a teenager. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal plays you.
Yes. The unfortunate part of that, Steve, is that when I go out speaking, I have to first apologize for not actually being Jake Gyllenhaal. They're going like, who is this old gray-haired dude, and where's that boy in the movie?
Yeah.
You know.
And Laura Dern is
Miss Riley.
Is Riley, the teacher, who is pivotal.
Yeah.
And
thank goodness.
The book was called The Rocket Boys to begin with.
Right, Rocket Boys, and then they ran the movie. They made the movie as Rocket Boys, and they ran it through test audiences, and test audiences were going like, well, where's Neil Armstrong? You know, and it's like, okay, so we need to change the title. October Sky is an anagram of Rocket Boys. If you take the letters of Rocket Boys and move them around, it spells out October Sky.
And of course there is the famous scene.
Sputnik, where Sputnik flies through the October sky.
And also the rockets you guys launched, because basically the story is you getting interested in rockets, and you were certainly interested in what was going on at NASA and Marshall Space.
I was in West Virginia at the time. A little coal town called Coalwood, with perfect company town. Company owned everything, every house, street, road, store, church. It even owned a church. We used to laugh and say we got the low bid religion, whatever religion the company wanted us to have.
Yeah.
It was that kind of little, very compact company town that I grew up in. And the idea that we might see something that the whole world was talking about, Sputnik at that time, back in 1957, before there was a NASA, by the way. That's kind of what started the whole story. When I saw Sputnik, I just said, I want to be part of that somehow. And that ultimately led me to start building rockets with some other boys. And that story, that part of my life is told in October Sky, where we built the rockets at the behest of our teacher, Miss Riley. And then we went off to the National Science Fair and won a gold medal. So it's a very inspirational story. I get all that. It's really, really great. But when I go out, people want to hear about the story and the book Rocket Boys and the movie October Sky, and what their differences is. And I don't tend to discuss what the differences are because it really doesn't matter.
No,
right?
but it is, and the thing is, that led you to become an engineer.
Yes, it did. Otherwise, I think, Steve, I would have become an English professor at some Midwest university and probably been real happy in my life.
but there's so many things that are interesting about you. You decided to be an engineer. You went to work for NASA.
Yeah, ultimately. I went to Virginia Tech. That was my mom. My mom said we were in West Virginia. So you think, okay, well, you should go to WVU or Marshall or something like that. But my mom said, no, Virginia Tech's only 100 miles from Coalwood. Morgantown, where WVU is an overnight at that time drive. Yeah. So she's the one applied for me and got me accepted at Virginia Tech and more or less pushed me out the door to go to Virginia Tech to be an engineer. And then, yes, I graduated from Virginia Tech as an engineer. But unfortunately, at the same time that Apollo was going on, so was Vietnam. And so that's where I ended up.
Yeah, you were an Army veteran, served in Vietnam.
Right.
And then eventually,
when I was 38 years old, Steve, which is pretty old for an engineer to come in to start working for NASA. Generally, they want to get the 20-year-olds and so on. So it was I always wanted to work for NASA, but it just seemed like every time that I applied that they were actually laying engineers off.
Yeah, and people don't really get that when we landed on the moon, Marshall Space Flight Center had been laying people off for a couple of years.
Exactly. Yeah, because everything had already been built that Marshall was going to build,
and they developed it.
Right. So then the shuttle era came along, but it took a while. You had Skylab in between, but it took a while to get there. So they weren't hiring a lot of engineers. I was actually over in Germany. I was working for the Corps of Engineers over there. And as my 3 years was up over in Germany, on a whim, I decided, well, I'm going to give NASA one more try here. And I sent in my application, and lo and behold, the Space Lab Program Office hired me from Germany. And that's how I started with NASA.
Okay, well, and to me, of course, my sense of it is you were probably, I don't know this, you were probably already a veteran scuba diver. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so are you not just an engineer in Marshall Space Flight Center for NASA, but you were working in the neutral buoyancy tank with astronauts?
Right. Yeah. So when the neutral buoyancy simulator was built, it was built back in the 1970s primarily for Skylab. And Werner von Braun pulled one of his shenanigans like he tended to do, where he went around the government that said, you can't build this. But he said, but can I modify a facility? And well, yes. And so he modified it by putting the neutral buoyancy simulator inside of a building that was already existed. Yeah. So it was there when I started working. It was a great facility, 75 feet across, 40 foot deep. And when I came in to work for the Space Lab Program Office, most of the divers there we were all volunteers. We weren't full-time employees in the tank, so they would call us when they needed us. And so immediately, of course, I was a scuba instructor at that time. I signed up as a volunteer. They called me over and saw that I was, pretty good at what I was doing. I knew what I was doing, and so pretty soon I was kind of the chief instructor over there. Again, they'd call me when they needed me, trying to train the other scuba divers, the new people in there, and we started working on all kinds of payloads, including the Hubble Space Telescope, and that was the big one. Immediately I met Kathy Sullivan and Bruce McCandless, who were on the flight to launch the Hubble Space Telescope, but we had to train them underwater. We had a complete mock-up of the cargo bay of the shuttle at the bottom of the tank, and then like a one-to-one mock-up that was very, very detailed of the Hubble Space Telescope. And theoretically, Bruce and Kathy were not going to have to go outside because this was all going to be launched automatically, but we wanted to train them, or Goddard was actually in charge of the mission, wanted to train them, what if it wasn't launched perfectly? Yeah. What if they needed to go out and do something? Well, it turned out that they did. They had to go out and help one of the solar panels unfurl.
Yeah, that's but to me, it's just cool that you wanted to be an engineer, and when people think of engineer at Marshall Space Flight Center, they don't think of you in a wetsuit underwater.
That's true. That's true. That's the facet of my career that most people don't even think about. That you'd have a job where you're working at your desk, right? Whatever it may be. I ended up in the training branch of mission ops. That we trained the astronauts to fly on the space lab and operate the experiments on Space Lab. People, okay, that's one job. Okay, but they didn't know. And a lot of us had this other job where we were on call at all time. We'd throw our pencils down and head to the tank, and it would be great. You know, we'd be over there with astronauts like Story Musgrave and Jeff Hoffman, and training them to go up and fix the Hubble.
Okay, I was going to ask you. Yeah. So when they did the mission that, if I remember correctly, everybody said, we're not going to do that. But the Hubble ended up being so valuable as a resource for scientific discovery that they did make the decision to go and repair it, which did require, am I correct, getting outside, getting out into space?
Yes. So quick story on that. So Jay Leno was making fun of the Hubble Space Telescope. He was calling it the Hubble Space Paperweight because when it went up, the mirror had been optically ground the wrong way. They'd used the wrong measuring stick on it, wrong end, as it turned out. Yeah. They had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. You have one job.
I noticed we never heard a name on it.
And I'm not going to mention any name. Poor guy, I don't know where he is now. But anyway, so it was slightly unfocused.
Yeah.
So they could have done.
But they did change. They used computers to alter it to what it was close,
but it was still still had a glare in it. So it needed to go up and get fixed. So it was the engineers at Goddard that determined what the fix was going to be, and it was basically kind of a sliding pole that you could maneuver such that you could change what the mirror was reflecting. I don't know all the details now. I forgot. Back to time, I knew it all, but now I don't. But anyway, so Goddard came up with a fix which required astronauts to go outside and to open up several of the doors that were not designed to be opened up, and put in a new instrument in order to totally 100% focus the Hubble. So they gave Houston gave a job to Story Musgrave, who is a fascinating guy. He's got MD and all kinds of PhDs, and he's really kind of a quirky guy. I don't know how he got to be an astronaut, but he turned out to be one of the best ones. And so he selected his crew. And so he came up to us and, okay, we're going to do this in neutral buoyancy simulator. Goddard had all the plans. They put some engineers like me in a suit to go down and go through the procedures to make sure that they were right, and then bring the crew in to do those procedures. And, of course, they'd change everything like they tend to do, but that's fine. At least they had a place to go. But Story came up and threw us the complete curve. It turned out that he was at the time enamored with a ice skater called Dorothy Hamill. You remember Dorothy Hamill?
I certainly remember
Hamill's
Dorothy
Camel,
Hamill.
gold medal winner. So he had talked to Dorothy. True story. He had talked to Dorothy Hamill, and Dorothy, and he was talking about, I'm going to go up and fix the Hubble, and we've got to go through all these procedures, right through 1 through 105, whatever the steps are. We have to do it precisely, or this isn't going to happen. And Dorothy said, well, when I practice, I never just do part of my routine. I do it from end to end. And this so impressed Story that he came up and said, I want to do this end to end. I want to go in there in the tank and go through all the procedures every time. I go, okay.
I'm assuming this is a fairly time-consuming thing, doing
6 hours. So, okay, 6 hours. Well, all right. Well, we would be fatigued, and we have to change our divers out, But, by the way, Story, if you go in there for 6 hours, do you realize that you are going to be so far into decompression that you're basically going to have to stay in there for another 2 hours?
How do you think about that? And that happens just at
it's 40 feet.
40 feet.
40 feet. 40 feet, you have 200 minutes.
Yeah.
And so beyond that, you're into decompression. And that means that your blood is saturated with nitrogen, and you can't come up until you breathe it off. So 6 hours turns into 8 hours, turns into 10 hours, turns into 12 hours. So it's okay. And Story says, well, I can't do that, but you need to solve it. So Viga Colpo was over there. Charlie Cooper also was advising, and they came up with, okay, the only way we can get around this is with a different gas, not air like we're used to pumping down to you. We're going to pump nitrox. Nitrox is a highly oxygenated version of air. It's you lower the nitrogen percent, which is the problem. Nitrogen gets absorbed into your tissue, and you increase the oxygen. So you could do 6 hours on nitrox and not have to decompress. Great. The only problem was the engineers who were working on that go, we've never pumped like that high in oxygen content inside this suit. We're afraid it might catch on fire, and so they go, no problem. Hey, you engineers like Homer and Al English and other engineers, get in the suit and see if this thing's going to catch on fire. So it's like, okay, all right, well, you're paying me a little extra here. Not quite that amount, but okay. I didn't think it was going to catch on fire. Believe me, Steve, I wouldn't have got it if I thought there was the slightest chance it would catch on fire, but they had to go through it.
No, yeah.
So we went into it. It's like, it's great. And nitrox, great gas to breathe at high oxygen. It's like, oh man, I feel great when I get out of here. So we put story in there, and we did the end to end. And what do you know?
How many times did you have to do that?
Oh gosh, it went on for months.
So you did. It was end to end several times.
Oh, many times, because they would change things. They would change. Okay, this doesn't work. That doesn't work. We can't do that with the gloves. Gloves.
Okay. Yes. So
we need to come up with it. And they were also in the process of using just like a ratchet wrench, and they ended up with what they called a Essex wrench. And again, it's all manual. Essex had like a mushroom top on the ratchet, and you turned it with your hand because you're dealing with these gloves that are very stiff. And also having to restrain yourself in microgravity, try to turn this thing. It was easier to turn it like this. Okay, that's one thing. Then somebody said, what if we put a battery in it? It's like, battery won't last that long. Well, let's invent a new battery. What do you know? Hubble Space Telescope probably caused a battery revolution that we now see in every big box store. When you go out and buy a battery operated drill or anything else, that came out of probably the battery people went, hey, and they came up with the lithium type of batteries,
and just
so on.
The whole idea of an electrified hand tool,
right?
That was developed from NASA needs. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. And that was it. It was the Hubble that probably started that whole thing. I can't document that, but I'm pretty sure, because I never saw it before, and the first time I saw it was underwater.
I feel like in my former TV career that I did stories about spinoffs, and that was one of the spinoffs.
Yeah. NASA should talk about that more, really.
Oh, yeah, they should. They used to talk about it more than they do now. And I want to ask you, there was one more big Hubble mission later, because it was basically going to not be working, and I feel like there was a long debate, and they eventually did do a mission, which was considered, I believe, dangerous. Like going to space is not.
Yeah, really.
I mean, if you're up there in space, you've already done the danger part.
Right.
But they did go. Did you work on that one at all?
No, that was after my time, and I believe that was all done in the NBL down in Houston. See, the neutral buoyancy lab replaced the neutral buoyancy simulator at Marshall. JSC had lobbied long and hard to replace it, and I mean, we pioneered all of that neutral buoyancy simulation, but I couldn't argue with them too much, because it required the astronauts to fly up here back and forth. A little bit dangerous in a T-38, which meant after you're underwater, you go up real high and you lower. You're running into decompression. So the NBL was almost inevitable. But that mission you're talking about was led by a fellow by the name of Mike Massimino, and astronaut Mike Massimino. And so I have a quick story about Mike. So I'm off in Japan training the first Japanese astronauts, and I come back, and it's like, for the first time ever, I mean, Steve, when you're a federal employee, this is like a big deal when you get an office to yourself. I mean, I had been working in these cubicles for all these years, and all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but because of my position now as the training manager for the first joint Japanese-American mission, by golly, I got my own little office. It was all to myself. I could even come in on the weekend and paint it any color I wanted to. It's like, oh man, this is the best thing ever. Just can't believe it. Got my own place. And so I'm off in Japan, and I come back, and I open the door to my office, and there sits this gigantic steel gray desk right in the middle of my office with mine kind of shoved in the corner, and they were sitting at that massive steel desk, is a massive young man. And his name was Mike Massimino. And I go, well, this can't stand. I was really kind of mean to Mike, and it's like, turned out that Mike was a intern from MIT. He had come down, and after a while, I finally accepted it. Okay, because everybody loved Mike. He's such a sweet guy,
and only a 2-person office. That's not too bad.
Yeah, but
it's not the same as
yeah, but I had my own.
No.
For like less than 30 days, it seemed like. But anyway, so Mike was. Everybody loved Mike, so I calmed down. It was okay. So I tell the story, and it might even be true, but I doubt that it is. And that is that Mike told me one day, Homer, I'm going to be an astronaut. And I said, Mike, you have about as much chance of being an astronaut as I have of writing a #1 New York Times bestseller.
Did you really say that?
I may not have, but I should have.
Well, I tell you what, let's just hear it now. Let's just assume you really did say that.
Yeah, it's a great story, right? It's all true except for the parts that are not.
So, by the way, Rocket Boys or October Sky was the New York Times #1 bestseller?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Dang. Yeah. We could have just talked about that for the whole time. Well, I'm impressed by writers. I'm impressed by you anyway. That didn't come out.
I'm
right.
impressed by you too.
But okay, so you were. That's not the only mission. The Hubble's not the only thing you worked on.
No. I trained the first Japanese astronauts, which meant I spent, when you totaled it up, about 2.5 years in Japan. And so it was a very, very important mission. It was the first time the Japanese were working with NASA. And so they were teaching us really on the way that they train. And then we were coming in on top of that and saying, okay, this is the way we train. And we really learned a lot from each other. I mean, a tremendous amount.
I was going to ask you, did you learn things from...
Yes, well, and we all did in the Space Lab office when we were first trying to see. Houston threw this job over to us, and we took it gladly. That is, they didn't have time to train astronauts on scientific payloads, so we got that. And so, how do we train an astronaut? It might be a jet jockey to operate a science payload, and it's intricate. So the Japanese and most academics had kind of the same idea, that you would first train the astronaut on the basics of the science, of whatever it might be, material science or life sciences or whatever it is. You'd take them through that academically, and then you would gradually train them on the intricacies in the glove box or whatever it is for their science. So after a mission or two, and we got that under our belt, I would go out to the payload people, and I also did the same thing with the Japanese, and I'd say, all right, so what's your plan to train the astronaut? And they would take me into a laboratory. It looked like something out of the Big Bang Theory, with all kinds of bubbling things going on in flasks and electronics and so on, and say, okay, well, we're going to have the astronaut do this and this and this and this and this. And I said, okay, so let me tell you what the astronaut would really like to see, and see how you can take all this and get close to it. What the astronaut would like to see in that rack is a blank panel except for one big button in the middle of it. And that button says on and off. Now, you may have two buttons. You can have two buttons, one green and one red. How close can you get to that? And of course, their eyes would get real big. Oh, and it's like, okay, so let's start working that direction and get as close to that as we possibly can. Because these guys don't have the rest of their lives to learn neuroscience. We've got to develop a procedure that's honestly relatively simple, because they're working in microgravity here. It's not like being in your laboratory where they could stop and go get another part. So that was interesting to learn how to do that, and also bring the Japanese around to that. They just weren't used to that. The Japanese tend to be very procedural in everything that they do. And so you have to be very careful on how you approach it. You don't want to say, well, the way you work in academia is wrong. It's not wrong. It's perfect for their students and their culture. it's not right for our culture, and somehow we have to come to a compromise. So yeah, working for the Japanese. And then I later, after the SLJ flight, which was in '92, I was assigned to this new thing called the International Space Station. And so I had to go to Moscow, which was interesting.
How long were you there?
Off and on, I went about 4 times. So a week or 2 at a time,
Okay.
over the next couple of years.
Were you doing the same sort of thing you do with the Japanese?
Yes,
learning from them and training them at the same time.
Well, of course, now we've got a totally different culture here, and we're actually dealing with a defeated enemy in a way.
Yeah.
And so we got to be real careful, and also it may be a defeated enemy, but very powerful in the space business, and knew what it was doing, right? So my job was to figure out how they would train our astronauts on their equipment, and how we would train their cosmonauts on our equipment without keeping these guys on the road forever.
Yeah.
And of course, the Russians go, everything that we proposed to kind of modify or compromise, they just kept saying niet all the way. And sitting across the table, Steve, from me were the same guys that launched Sputnik. After Apollo, most of our engineers, they retired. They went elsewhere. These were the same guys that launched Sputnik. They had nowhere to go, which was very impressive. And what I did was, this is something that maybe the State Department should note, that the Russians never, ever agree with anything across the table. That was my experience at a meeting. Never. They just don't do it. Where you get the Russians to agree with you is the party after the meeting. And there's always a party after the meeting. I don't care if the meeting's at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 11:30, there is a party.
And does that party include vodka?
Lots of vodka. So, and I learned that, thank goodness that water looks like vodka, because I would pour my drink out in a potted plant. Go in the bathroom surreptitiously and fill it up with water, which God only knows what was in that water. Yeah. And that's what I would sip on. But I started telling them about that I was a kid in 1957, and like lots of American kids, I was so totally, utterly impressed by Sputnik, what they had launched, that it made me want to be an engineer and get into the space business. And you know what, Steve? They had never heard that.
Are you kidding?
They did not know that. They did not know that. Wow. And so they liked this story, and they started saying "da" to some of the things that that I proposed. Wow. And the next thing you know, we had a compromise and an agreement. So I was like, "This is great."
That's pretty. So how long were you with NASA?
I started in '81 and retired in '99, or right at January '99 or so. Okay. So yeah, pretty long. And
what was the last thing you worked on?
Station.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask you this. I want to talk just a little bit about and in your case, it is the romance of being an engineer, because our whole nonprofit Digital Works and what we're doing is we're talking about finding a career in an engineering field or a technical field. You could be a modeler for a systems engineer, and this model-based systems engineering is kind of after you, although I'm sure you know all about it because you're an engineer. But the whole idea of being an engineer and doing important, great things, I've got to believe that if you're an engineer, that's in the back of every engineer's mind. Am I right about that?
Well, it definitely is in every NASA engineer, for sure. I woke up every morning, honestly, Steve, and said, "Oh boy, I get to go work for NASA today." I really did. It's like, wow, this is great.
And I totally believe you, because I had more Apollo engineers tell me that. Said we were working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, and we wanted to. So we woke up every morning wanting to go to work.
Yes. That's one of the things that I say about people. Well, did you really go to the moon? And I go look at the divorce records in the Madison County courthouse for the 1960s.
It was all-consuming, wasn't it?
All-consuming, and of course that was before my time, but it was still true in the shuttle era and the Space Lab era. And leading into the station era, that we were obsessed I mean, honest to goodness, they could have paid us half of what they did, or in
'Cause you
some
want-
cases not paid us at all. You know, to do what we did. We loved it.
But
We
these kind
absolutely
of
loved
things, I mean, I've talked to guys working on the SLS, and they seem to have the same sort of drive that when you do things that have never been done, which is basically what engineers do. They figure out ways to do things.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
there-
well, and, you know, in the space business,
Yeah.
and that's one I can really talk to. But I'm sure that there's other businesses
Yeah.
that this is true. But in aerospace, you really are. You're always on the cutting edge of technology, which is kind of cool. And you have to learn how to use new things like 3D printers and so on as they come out. Any other technology that changes, no matter what it is, in metallurgy or even physics, the engineer has to absorb that and go, how can I apply that to my job? So you're constantly thinking about, you should be constantly thinking about new ways, better ways of doing things, not necessarily more efficient, because then you start getting into money there, and that money may not be available, but you at least want to be able to know what is the best way to do something. Now, one of the things that engineers have to learn is that perfect is the enemy of good enough, and that's sometimes where NASA engineers.
Now write that.
Well, that's sometimes where NASA engineers get into trouble. We want to make it perfect, but good enough is.
This is like a movie.
Good, we can afford good enough, but not perfect.
There was a movie I was watching the other day, and the guy said that the most unfortunate two words in the English language are "good job."
Yeah, maybe. That may be. Well, we tend to. When I hear "good job," I think I just got patted on the head.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, and you learn that over time. When somebody gives you a job, I remember, I was pretty good about estimating costs.
Yeah.
And so I can remember a case where we were talking about putting a centrifuge on the International Space Station. And even though that was kind of, I was in training, but they knew I was pretty good about estimating costs. So one of my hires from Building 4200 called me and said, Homer, here's what we want to do with this centrifuge. I'm going to send you a package on it so you can see what it is. And I want you to estimate the cost of what it would take to build this. I said, great. How much do you want it to cost?
Okay, that's interesting. Huh?
So tell me how much you want it to cost, because I'm
that-
probably going to be able to come up with
As
that.
a quick aside, and I had a former NASA guy tell me one time that one of the problems NASA has is having to give costs for everything that are unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because the people who come up with the money don't want to hear that it's going to take 4 years longer than they want it to take, or it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Is that in your career? And it sounds like you're saying that that the unreality of figuring out what doing things that have never been done before is going to cost.
Yeah, you're
is
not
the
doing
problem.
anything necessarily dishonest.
Yeah.
But you want to get this project going. And you only going to have X number of dollars to do it. And you kind of know, well, if everything just went totally, utterly perfectly, it would probably only take X. But you're dealing with new technology. You never know. Maybe the materials that you think exist aren't quite as strong as you thought that they were, this kind of thing. So that's where the cost plus type of contracts come in, where you let the contract for a certain amount of money, and then the contractor comes back, and if they have, that if they have permission to do it, they're always going to come back and say, we need more money, a little bit more time, and so on. And the next thing you know, this thing is done in increments and ends up costing twice,
and then
10 times more.
That's an over and over again thing.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's not dishonest. Ultimately, you get the product you're looking for, and Congress has to prove it every step of the way. But sometimes you just can't get anything off the ground if you don't do it that way. Now, on the other hand, you got companies like SpaceX and now Blue Origin and so on. They can take chances and end up where an organization like NASA has to be pretty conservative about things, and everything has to work kind of the first time. Where SpaceX and Blue
we've lost
Origin,
the ability to test. No, we have lost the ability, but the perception of a test that doesn't go perfectly means you're failed. Whereas talk to the guys with Apollo. guy named Alex McCool said,
Yeah.
we blew up stuff every
Right.
day.
Yeah, and you see that was the Von Braun team's
Yeah.
the way that they did things. So the Von Braun team, and they were building rocket engines. That's essentially what they did. So they believed in testing everything to failure. They tested it. They wanted to see when it would blow up. So they would do it. So, but now, a lot of times engineers are, it's like, okay, we'll simulate it on a computer.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk is one of those people who's like, I don't want to simulate it on a computer. I want to see if this thing's really going to blow up. They can get away with that because
And they've unfortunately had things have blown up.
Oh yes, and who knows whether
and that's those every blow up is expensive and
yeah.
In the space engineering business, it does all kind of come back to money every time, doesn't it?
It does ultimately. Anytime you're talking about the federal government, you're talking about money. Really, that's basically what it does is give money for whatever it wants accomplished to other people to get it to accomplish that. Of course, Elon is one of those, and I think Jeff Bezos too. They have this vision of making us into a multiplanetary species. And they're willing, at least Elon is, and I think Jeff is too, they're willing to risk their fortune to try to make that happen, whether the federal government, U.S. government, supports it or not. And that's a very risky thing to do. I'll take my hat off to them.
Yeah.
Good for them, and I hope it works. So.
I want to get back to the engineering career. Could you imagine yourself doing anything else? And looking back at your career, and the fact that we started off talking today about the movie and about you starting to dream.
Yeah.
And you got to, so few people get to live their dreams as you have.
Yeah.
When you look back at it, I mean, do you think, does Homer Hickam ever pinch himself and say, man, I can't believe that I've done all these things?
Oh, constantly. And so, again, I was... growing up as a kid, I was really just more oriented into reading and writing, and wasn't very particularly good in math. I don't think that if Sputnik had not happened when it did, I might have ended up being an English professor in Kansas somewhere. But that made me that thrilled me so much, and I really wanted to be part of that. So then that's when I decided I wanted to be an engineer. Also, in terms of role models around Coalwood, where I grew up, there was like coal miners, coal mine superintendents, engineers, and doctors. That was about, and a dentist. And a preacher. Yeah. Those were the role models that I had.
Those are kind of the careers, weren't they?
Yeah, so choosing from those, I might have come up with the engineer on my own anyway. I'm not sure, but I'm glad I did, Steve. I really am glad I did. Virginia Tech was a tough school. People ask me, Homer, do you have PTSD from Vietnam? I said, no, but I do from Virginia Tech. Because I wake up in a cold sweat that I flunked an exam.
But it's funny, and I will ask you if this is true. In the movie, I think you were figuring out a trajectory. You needed to learn a kind of math that you did not learn. Did you do that?
Yes. Not like they showed in the movie. That equation was S = 1/2 AT squared, which is the equation to determine altitude, and they show it in the movie as determining range. And I looked at that when they were doing it, and I'm going, should I tell them? And I thought, nah.
Probably some reviewer somewhere said, a mathematician told me that ain't right.
I have never seen anybody comment on that. So I was very wise going, no, I should just not mess with that.
That's cool, though. But I
but
guess
we did learn calculus, Steve.
Yeah.
We had to learn calculus.
Yeah.
It was not taught in our school. So Miss Riley went to the principal and said, these boys need to learn calculus. And Mr. Turner, our principal, said, Miss Riley, that costs money. You realize that. And Miss Riley said, these boys need to learn calculus. And so we got a calculus class after hours so that we could understand how to design the rocket nozzle. That was the big thing that we had to learn how to design. So.
And what you just said, I got chills a little bit because thinking about all the things that teachers have done for all of us.
Amen to that.
That the basis, and I've always thought this, the basis of our civilization is on the backs of the teachers who they don't make the money, they don't get in most cases, the praise, the applause, but they change lives. And you're sitting here because your teacher.
Yes, Miss Riley. And all my teachers, but specifically her,
Yeah.
for the Rocket Boys, and ultimately going to the National Science Fair and winning a gold medal there. But in her memory, and all the teachers that I had, I'm on the board at the Space and Rocket Center, the Space Camp. Every summer we have educators come, mostly on scholarship, and I go out during the summer. It's usually on a Monday morning, the way it works out with graduation, and go out and talk to those teachers about Rocket Boys, about October Sky, about Miss Riley, and I just love it. And those teachers are so dedicated. I'm like everybody else. I see on internet and TV, how education is falling off and teachers are not doing their jobs. But when I go out there and meet those teachers, that just shatters that whole stereotype. They are so dedicated to their students and trying to do a great job. Yeah. And anything that we can do here in Huntsville at Space Camp to promote that and give them materials to take back and impress their students, not necessarily on becoming an engineer or working for NASA or so on, but just doing their best and or better. And that's one of the books that I wrote. It's kind of the punchline throughout. That was a sequel to Rocket Boys, where I'm constantly telling my mom, my dad, the preacher, and Miss Riley that I'm doing my best, and they all say, do better.
Well, that's pretty good. By the way, you brought a copy of your book, Don't Blow Yourself Up. That's the sequel.
Yes, so that starts, the way Rocket Boys ends, and also the movie, is the day that we launch our final rocket.
Yeah.
So that book starts that evening and on until the movie October Sky is made. So it covers Vietnam, Virginia Tech, all the diving, and then my experience with NASA and Japan and Russia. And then how I ended up writing Rocket Boys, and then how the movie was made. So it covers a lot of ground.
Don't blow yourself up. The further true adventures and travails of the Rocket Boy of October Sky, Homer Hickam. #1 New York Times bestselling author.
There you go. Thank you.
And they'd be suing you if that wasn't right.
That's honestly true too, and Mike Massimino, by the way, did become a great astronaut and had a great career. He was the astronaut that shows up on Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you ever.
I've not a lot, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you: would you come back and do this again sometime?
Oh, sure.
There's lots more we can talk about.
Yeah.
But there's construction in this building, and I'm vibrantly aware that they're holding off making noise.
Yeah,
while
maybe one of those NASA-developed battery-operated drills might start up. Huh?
Yeah, well, that's a mighty noisy drill. But Homer Hickam, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
For being with us. And thank you for joining us on Digital Works TV. I'm Steve Johnson. He's Homer Hickam. You've heard of him, I know. And don't forget, it works.